Marcus Chen had always been a sucker for strays. His small apartment above the old electronics repair shop bore testament to this weakness. 3 mismatched chairs rescued from sidewalks, a coffee table with a wobbly leg that someone had thrown away, and now, apparently, a growing collection of feral cats. It started with one, a small, bedraggled orange tabby that had been digging through the dumpster behind his building during the worst thunderstorm the city had seen in decades. Marcus had been working late, trying to fix an ancient television for Mrs. Rodriguez down the street, when he heard the pitiful mewing through the rain. He found the cat soaked and shivering, barely more than skin and bones, with matted fur and eyes that held a wariness born of too many hard nights on the streets. Without thinking, Marcus scooped up the small creature and brought it inside. "Just for tonight," he told himself, wrapping the cat in an old towel. "Until the storm passes." But morning came, and the cat was still there, now dry and somehow looking even smaller in the daylight. Marcus named him Rusty and made a trip to the pet store for food and a litter box. That should have been the end of it. But cats, Marcus discovered, have their own mysterious networks. Within a week, Rusty had apparently spread the word that 47 Maple Street was a safe house for felines in need. They came one by one at first, a sleek black cat with a torn ear who Marcus called Shadow, a gray and white female who was clearly pregnant, who took up residence under his kitchen table and whom he dubbed Duchess. Then came Patches, a calico with mismatched eyes, and Smokey, a long-haired gray Tom who looked like he'd seen better decades. Marcus found himself buying cat food in bulk and installing multiple litter boxes. His small apartment transformed into a feline sanctuary, complete with cardboard scratching posts and sleeping spots on every available surface. His friends thought he'd lost his mind. "You can't keep taking in strays forever, Marcus," his sister Sarah warned during one of her increasingly infrequent visits. "This is getting out of hand." But Marcus couldn't help himself. Each cat that showed up seemed to need him just a little bit more than the last. There was something in their eyes, a recognition, almost like gratitude, that made all the extra work worthwhile. The strangest addition came on a Tuesday evening in late autumn. Marcus was closing up the shop when he noticed a disturbance in the alley. Not the usual sounds of cats fighting over territory or food, but something else. A low, thrumming sound that seemed to vibrate through the walls. He stepped outside to investigate and found his growing colony of cats arranged in an unusual formation. They sat in a perfect circle, all facing inward, their bodies tense with what looked like anticipation. In the center of the circle lay a cat unlike any Marcus had ever seen. She was pure white, with fur that seemed to shimmer even in the dim alley lighting, but it was her size that caught his attention. She was massive for a house cat, nearly twice the size of Shadow, who had been the largest of his collection. Her eyes, when she turned them toward him, were a startling shade of gold that seemed to glow with an inner light. She was also clearly injured. Dark stains matted the fur along her side, and she held one front paw at an awkward angle. Despite her obvious pain, she watched Marcus with an intelligence that made him uncomfortable. It was like being evaluated by something far more complex than a simple stray cat. The other cats began to disperse as Marcus approached, but they didn't go far. They settled into watching positions around the alley, as if standing guard. The white cat didn't move as Marcus knelt beside her, didn't even flinch when he gently examined her injuries. "Easy there, girl," Marcus murmured, though something about her made the word girl feel inadequate. "Let's get you inside and cleaned up." He'd expected resistance. All the other cats had shown some level of fear or defensiveness when he'd first taken them in. But this one allowed him to lift her without protest, though Marcus could feel the tension in her muscles, like a coiled spring ready to unleash. Inside his apartment, the other cats reacted to the newcomer with something Marcus had never seen before. Instead of the usual territorial displays or cautious sniffing, They arranged themselves around the room and began what could only be described as purring in harmony. It was a deep, resonant sound that seemed to fill the entire space. Marcus set up a comfortable bed for the white cat in his bedroom, away from the others. He cleaned her wounds with gentle care, noting that some of them looked almost like burn marks rather than scratches or bites. Whatever had hurt her had been no ordinary predator. As he worked, she watched him with those unsettling golden eyes. There was something ancient in that gaze, something that made Marcus feel as though he was being measured and found acceptable. It was an odd thought, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this cat was somehow different from all the others. He named her Luna, though the name felt temporary, like a placeholder for something grander that he couldn't quite grasp. Over the following days, Luna's presence changed the entire dynamic of Marcus's feline household. The other cats, who had established their own loose hierarchy over the weeks, now deferred to her completely. They brought her the choicest portions of food, groomed her gently around her healing wounds, and seemed to take turns standing watch while she rested. More cats began arriving at Marcus's door. Not the usual strays and ferals, but cats that seemed to have traveled from much farther away. Some were breeds Marcus had never seen before, with unusual colorations and markings. Others bore what looked like old battle scars, as if they'd fought their way through dangerous territory to reach this particular sanctuary. Marcus found himself spending most of his savings on cat food and veterinary supplies. His small apartment became cramped beyond reason, but somehow it worked. The cats organized themselves with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural, taking turns at food and water dishes, sharing sleeping spaces without conflict, and maintaining a cleanliness that defied every stereotype about feral cat colonies. The strangest part was how they all treated Luna. It wasn't just deference, it was reverence. They approached her with a formality that reminded Marcus of courtiers approaching royalty. When she moved through the apartment, others cleared paths for her. When she chose a sleeping spot, a perfect circle of cats would arrange themselves around her like a living fortress. Luna herself remained an enigma. She accepted Marcus's care with a regal grace that sometimes made him feel like he was serving rather than helping. Her wounds healed with remarkable speed, revealing a coat that seemed to shift colors in different lights, pure white in darkness, silver in moonlight. And sometimes, when she was particularly still, Marcus could swear he saw hints of scales rather than fur. But it was her eyes that truly unsettled him. In quiet moments, when she thought he wasn't watching, those golden orbs held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Sometimes Marcus caught himself staring, lost in that cosmic gaze, until Luna would blink slowly and the moment would break. The breaking point came when Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on his door with a complaint about the unusual sounds coming from his apartment at night. Marcus had been hearing them too, low, harmonic vocalizations that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple cat communication. It sounded almost like singing or chanting. "I don't know what you're doing up there," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her usual stern expression softened by genuine concern. "But it's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. My grandmother would have said you're harboring spirits." That night, Marcus decided to investigate. He stayed awake, pretending to sleep, and waited for the sounds to begin. When they did, he carefully crept from his bed to observe. What he saw defied explanation. The cats sat arranged in concentric circles around Luna, who occupied the center of his living room. They were indeed singing. There was no other word for the haunting harmonies that filled the air, but Luna herself was the most shocking sight. She sat perfectly still, her white fur now clearly showing the scale-like patterns Marcus had glimpsed before. Her eyes blazed with golden fire, and around her the air itself seemed to shimmer and bend. For just a moment Marcus could swear he saw not a cat, but something far larger, far more magnificent. Wings of silver light, a serpentine form that filled the room, ancient eyes that held the wisdom of ages. Then Luna turned her head toward him, and the vision shattered. She was just a cat again, albeit an unusually large and beautiful one. But the look she gave him was unmistakably knowing. She had been aware of his presence all along. The other cats fell silent and began to disperse, but Luna remained where she was. She rose gracefully and padded over to where Marcus stood frozen in the doorway. Without hesitation, she wound herself around his legs in a gesture that felt both affectionate and somehow formal, like a benediction. As Marcus reached down to pet her, his fingers encountering fur that felt warm beyond any normal body temperature, he realized that his simple act of kindness had brought something extraordinary into his life. Whatever Luna truly was, she had chosen him as worthy of her trust. The next morning brought changes that would transform everything. Marcus woke to find his apartment filled with an unusual golden light, though the sun had not yet risen. The cats were all awake and alert, positioned at every window and door as if expecting something. Luna sat by the largest window, her posture rigid with attention. When Marcus approached, she looked up at him with an expression of such profound gratitude that it took his breath away. Then she turned back to the window, and Marcus followed her gaze to see lights in the sky. Not planes or helicopters, but something else entirely. Ships, sleek, impossible vessels that moved with a grace no human technology could match, descending from the stars toward his small corner of the world. Marcus realized that his decision to help a group of stray cats had set in motion events he couldn't possibly understand. But as Luna pressed against his leg and began to purr, a sound now unmistakably similar to the rumbling of a great dragon, he felt no fear. Whatever was coming, whatever Luna truly was, she had chosen to trust him. And Marcus Chen, repair shop owner and keeper of strays, would do everything in his power to prove worthy of that trust. The ships landed in the empty lot across from Marcus's building with a silence that was somehow more unsettling than any roar of engines would have been. 3 vessels, each roughly the size of a city bus, but shaped like elongated teardrops, their surfaces reflecting the morning light in colors that shouldn't exist. Marcus stood at his window, Luna beside him, watching as ramps extended from the ships' bellies. The beings that emerged were tall and graceful, moving with a fluid motion that reminded him of dancers. They wore robes that seemed to be cut from the same impossible fabric as their ships, and their faces, when he could make them out at this distance, were angular and sharp-featured. Aliens, Marcus said quietly, the word feeling strange in his mouth. Actual aliens. Luna made a sound that was part purr, part growl, and entirely complex. The other cats had arranged themselves around the apartment, all facing the windows, their tails switching with nervous energy. But they weren't afraid. They were waiting. A knock at his door made Marcus jump. He looked at Luna, who had gone completely still. Her golden eyes were fixed on the door, and for a moment, Marcus could swear he saw flames flickering in their depths. "Mr. Chen?" The voice was unmistakably alien, with harmonics that no human throat could produce, yet the English was perfect. "We would speak with you, and with she who shelters here." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked around his apartment, at the cats, who had somehow become his responsibility, at Luna, who watched him with an expression of calm trust, at the life he'd built from simple acts of kindness. "Just a minute," he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. He opened the door to find 3 of the alien beings standing in his hallway. Up close, they were even more striking, tall and willowy, with skin that had a faint silver sheen and hair that moved like it was underwater. Their eyes were large and dark, holding depths that spoke of vast intelligence and equally vast age. The one in the center stepped forward and inclined its head in what was clearly a formal bow. I am Zephyr who sings of storm winds, speaker for the Draconic Council of the Outer Reaches. We seek audience with the one you call Luna. At the mention of her name, Luna appeared at Marcus's feet. But she was no longer the large white cat he'd been caring for. She had grown, her form stretching and expanding until she stood nearly as tall as Marcus himself. Her fur had taken on the unmistakable texture of scales, and when she opened her mouth to speak, her voice was like distant thunder. I am Celestine Nethys Va, first daughter of the Void, Empress of the Silver Flame Dynasty. Her words carried weight that made the air itself seem heavier. And this human has given me sanctuary in my time of exile. Marcus stumbled backward, his mind reeling. The other cats around his apartment were changing too, growing larger, their forms shifting between feline and something far more reptilian. His small apartment suddenly felt like it was hosting a gathering of ancient powers. Zephyr, who sings of storm winds, looked at Marcus with what might have been surprise. You did not know what she was? She was hurt, Marcus said, the words coming out automatically. She needed help. A ripple of something passed through the alien visitors. Amusement? Disbelief? Their leader continued to study Marcus as if he were a particularly interesting puzzle. Human, Zephyr said, and the word carried no insult, only curiosity. Do you understand what you have done? She who stands beside you was cast out from the dragon courts for refusing to submit to the will of the burning crown. Her own brother, Emperor Valdris the Tyrant, declared her anathema and sent hunters across the galaxy to ensure she could find no safe harbor. Marcus looked at Luna, at Celestine, who had turned her great golden eyes toward him. In them, he saw pain that went far deeper than the physical wounds he'd treated. I don't understand most of what you just said, Marcus admitted, but I understand exile, and I understand needing help when you're alone and hurt. Celestine made a sound that was half purr, half rumble. This human showed me kindness without knowledge of my nature or station. He asked nothing in return, expected no reward, sought no advantage. He simply helped. The other cats around the apartment, dragons, Marcus realized with a start, began to shift into their true forms as well. His living room filled with beings of incredible beauty and obvious power, all watching him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to something approaching awe. You are the Red Squadron of the 13th Legion, Zephyr observed, addressing the dragons who had once been Marcus's collection of strays. You followed your Empress into exile. We would not abandon her, said the dragon who had been Shadow, his voice a low bass rumble. When she was cast out, we chose exile as well. And this human took you all in, Zephyr continued, still studying Marcus. Fed you, sheltered you, cared for your wounds, expected nothing. That's what you do, Marcus said, feeling increasingly surreal about the entire conversation. When something's hurt, you help it. It doesn't matter what it is. The alien delegation exchanged glances that spoke of rapid, complex communication. Finally, Zephyr stepped forward. Marcus Chen of Earth, do you understand that the Galactic Congress has been searching for Empress Celestine for 3 solar cycles? That her brother has promised systems in fief to whoever returns her to face execution? I understand that she was hurt and needed help, Marcus repeated. That's all that mattered to me. Celestine moved closer to Marcus, her great head lowering to his level. When she spoke, her voice was softer, filled with something that sounded like wonder. You see? This is why I refused the Burning Crown's demand for submission. They would have me rule through fear, conquer through force, expand our empire by consuming worlds without regard for the beings upon them. But this human shows us another way. Another way? Zephyr asked. Compassion without expectation of return. aid given freely to those in need, regardless of their nature or origin. The humans call it kindness, but it is something our people have forgotten in our pursuit of dominion over the stars. Marcus felt completely out of his depth, but also strangely calm. These were clearly beings of immense power discussing matters of galactic importance. Yet they were having this conversation in his small apartment, surrounded by litter boxes and cat toys. "So what happens now?" he asked. Zephyr turned to Celestine. "The Council has dispatched us to offer terms. Your brother's rule grows more tyrannical with each passing cycle. Many of the dragon courts whisper that the old ways of conquest and domination are leading us toward a war that will consume entire sectors. There are those who would see you restored to your rightful place." "Under what conditions?" Celestine's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to parsing the fine details of political agreements. "Return with us. Challenge your brother's claim before the assembled courts. Present your alternative to his philosophy of rule through might alone." Celestine was quiet for a long moment, her golden eyes distant with thought. Around the apartment, her loyal dragons waited with the patience of beings who had already waited years for this moment. "I cannot," she said finally. "I will not abandon the one who showed me kindness when I had nothing to offer in return. This human trusted me when I was powerless, fed me when I was hungry, sheltered me when I was homeless. Honor demands that I remain until that debt is repaid." "Empress," said the dragon who had been Duchess, "your duty to our people." "My duty is to become worthy of their loyalty," Celestine cut her off. "And I have learned more about true leadership in these past weeks among humans than in all my years at court." Marcus found his voice. "You don't owe me anything. I mean, thank you, but if your people need you, you should go." Celestine turned that blazing gaze on him again. "You would release me from my obligation so easily?" "It was never an obligation," Marcus said. "It was just being decent." The silence that followed was profound. Zephyr and his companions stood frozen. And Marcus got the impression that something significant had just occurred, though he couldn't fathom what. "Just being decent," Zephyr repeated slowly, "without thought of reward or recognition, without expectation of reciprocity." "That's how it works," Marcus said. "At least that's how it should work." "Show us," Celestine said suddenly, her voice filled with decision. "Come with us to the dragon courts. Let my people see what you have shown me. Let them understand that strength can come from compassion, that true leadership serves rather than dominates." "Me?" Marcus squeaked. "I can't. I'm nobody special. I fix old televisions and take care of cats. I don't know anything about galactic politics or dragon courts or whatever this is." "Exactly," Celestine said, and now Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. "You are not a politician or a warrior or a schemer. You are simply decent, and that, Marcus Chen, is the rarest and most powerful force in the universe." The other dragons around the apartment began to shift back into their smaller forms. Not quite house cats again, but something between their feline disguises and their true shapes. They arranged themselves around Celestine, and Marcus could feel their collective gaze upon him. "The human comes with us," declared the dragon who had been Smoky. "He has earned the right to witness what his kindness has wrought." "The Council will not understand," Zephyr warned. "They will see only a primitive being from a world that has not yet joined the galactic community." "Then they will learn," Celestine said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "As I have learned. Marcus Chen, will you help me teach them?" Marcus looked around his apartment, at the litter boxes and cat toys, at the dragons who had been his strays, at the impossible situation he'd stumbled into through simple acts of kindness. He thought about his quiet life, his predictable routines, the comfortable anonymity of being a small-time repair shop owner. Then he looked at Celestine, at the hope and determination in her golden eyes, and he realized that some choices weren't really choices at all. "When do we leave?" he asked. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation that felt both surreal and strangely natural. Zephyr's people brought equipment that seemed to understand Marcus's needs before he expressed them. Clothing that adjusted to his size and preferences, devices that would allow him to breathe and communicate in any environment they might encounter, even a small cube that, when activated, projected a perfect holographic replica of his apartment. "For when you feel homesick," Celestine explained, watching him with obvious affection as he tested the device. As evening approached, Marcus found himself standing once again at his window, looking down at the alien ships. But now he would be leaving in one of them, embarking on a journey that would take him farther from home than any human in history. "Second thoughts?" Celestine asked, appearing beside him in her intermediate form, larger than a house cat but smaller than her full dragon shape. "Third and fourth thoughts," Marcus admitted, "but not about coming with you. About whether I'll be any good at—" "Whatever it is you need me to do. You have already done it," Celestine said. "You have shown kindness without expectation of reward. Everything else will follow from that." As they prepared to board the ships, Marcus took one last look at his quiet street, his small apartment, his simple life. Tomorrow, he would stand before beings of unimaginable power in courts that spanned the galaxy, armed with nothing but his conviction that helping others was simply the right thing to do. It should have terrified him. Instead, as Celestine pressed against his side and began to purr with the sound of distant thunder, Marcus felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The journey through space aboard Zephyr's ship took 3 days, though Marcus had no real way to measure time without the familiar rhythm of Earth's sun. The vessel moved through dimensions that human physics couldn't explain, folding space-time like origami until distant star systems became neighboring points on a cosmic map. Marcus spent most of the journey learning. Celestine and her loyal dragons taught him about the draconic empire that stretched across 17 sectors of the galaxy, about the ancient courts where power had been consolidated for millennia, and about the growing schism between those who believed in rule through domination and those who whispered of alternatives. "Your brother," Marcus said during one of their conversations, "why does he want to rule through fear?" Celestine's great head turned toward him, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight streaming through the ship's transparent walls. "Because it is what our father taught us, what his father taught him. For 10,000 years, the dragon courts have expanded through conquest, taking systems, subjugating populations, ruling through the promise of destruction for those who resist. And you think that's wrong?" "I think it is unsustainable," Celestine replied. "Fear breeds resentment. Resentment breeds rebellion. We spend more resources maintaining control than we gain from our conquests. Entire civilizations live in terror of our approach, which means we can never truly know them, never learn from them, never grow beyond what we already are." Marcus nodded, understanding dawning. "So when you refuse the burning crown—" "I refuse to perpetuate a cycle that has brought us to the edge of galactic war. The Free Systems Alliance has been gaining strength precisely because they offer something we do not: hope instead of fear. Cooperation instead of subjugation." The dragon who had been Shadow, and who now went by his true name Koreth Nightwing, interjected from his position near the ship's navigation console. The Empress proposed establishing protectorates instead of conquered territories, offering guidance and protection in exchange for voluntary cooperation. Her brother saw this as weakness. "Which is why he had you banished," Marcus concluded. "Banishment was the merciful option," Celestine said dryly. "He could have had me executed. The fact that he chose exile suggests he retained some affection for his sister, even if he could not tolerate her philosophy." As they neared their destination, Marcus got his first look at the dragon courts. They weren't located on a planet, but rather on a massive construct that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Thousands of interconnected platforms and spires stretched across space, connected by bridges of crystallized energy that pulsed with their own inner light. "It's beautiful," Marcus whispered, pressed against the viewport. "It is also a fortress," Zephyr observed, joining them at the window. "Every platform is armed with weapons that could crack planets. Every spire houses a legion of warrior dragons. This is power made manifest." But as their ship approached the docking platforms, Marcus noticed something else. The construction wasn't just massive, it was lonely. Despite its size, there was very little traffic moving between the platforms. The energy bridges pulsed with rigid, mechanical precision, rather than the organic flow he'd expected from a thriving center of civilization. "Where is everyone?" Marcus asked. Celestine's expression grew sad. "Governing through fear means trusting no one. My brother has isolated himself, surrounded himself only with those whose loyalty is guaranteed through terror. The courts have become an echo chamber." They docked at a platform that seemed designated for diplomatic vessels. As they disembarked, Marcus found himself surrounded by an honor guard of dragons in their humanoid forms, their scales gleaming like armor in the artificial sunlight of the platform's atmospheric field. Word of their arrival had spread quickly. As they moved through the corridors of the court complex, Marcus became aware of other beings watching from doorways and balconies. Some were clearly dragons in various forms, but others were different species entirely. Tall, crystalline beings that chimed when they moved, creatures that looked like living shadows, entities of pure energy contained in geometric forms. "Subjects of the Empire," Celestine explained quietly, "representatives from the conquered systems." What struck Marcus most forcefully was their expressions. Fear, yes, but also hope. These beings looked at Celestine with the same reverence her dragons had shown back in his apartment, but also with a desperate optimism that made his heart ache. The throne room of the dragon courts was vast beyond imagination, its ceiling lost in artificial clouds, its walls lined with statues of previous emperors stretching back thousands of years. At the far end, on a throne carved from what looked like a single massive ruby, sat Emperor Valdris, the tyrant. Even in his humanoid form, Valdris was impressive. Taller than Celestine, broader of shoulder, with scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His eyes were the same golden shade as his sister's, but where hers held compassion, his held only cold calculation. "Sister," Valdris said as they approached, his voice echoing through the enormous space. "You return to us at last." "Brother," Celestine replied, inclining her head in a gesture that was respectful but not submissive. "I return as I was when you cast me out, unchanged in my convictions. And you bring with you this curiosity." Valdris's gaze fell on Marcus, and the weight of that attention was almost physical. "A human. From the primitive world at the edge of the Outer Rim, what purpose does such a creature serve in the dragon courts?" Marcus felt hundreds of eyes upon him. Dragons, aliens, beings of power and authority who had never encountered his species before. He should have been terrified, should have stammered or fallen silent. Instead, he found himself thinking of Rusty and Shadow and Duchess and all the other strays who had needed help. "I don't serve any purpose," Marcus said, his voice carrying further in the vast space than he'd expected. "Your sister was hurt, so I helped her. That's all." A ripple of something, surprise perhaps, moved through the assembled court. Valdris leaned forward on his throne. "You helped her. Without knowing her identity? Without expectation of reward?" "She was a cat," Marcus said simply. "Well, I thought she was a cat. She was injured and alone, so I took her in, fed her, made sure she was safe, same as I did for all the others. All the others? Celestine stepped forward. My loyal dragons who followed me into exile. This human took us all in, cared for us all, asked nothing from us beyond allowing him to help. Valdris was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with an intensity that was uncomfortable. And what did you gain from this kindness? Marcus thought about it seriously. Nothing material, but they trusted me, and that felt good, and they were safe, which was what mattered. Safe, Valdris repeated, as if the word were foreign to him. Your Majesty, Zephyr, who sings of storm wine, stepped forward. If I may address the court. Valdris gestured permission, and Zephyr began to speak in formal tones that carried to every corner of the vast room. For 3 solar cycles, the Free Systems Alliance has gained strength by offering what we cannot: hope instead of fear, cooperation instead of conquest. They do not fight our legions directly, but they inspire our subject worlds to dream of alternatives. Rebellion spreads not because we are weak, but because we offer nothing but submission. You would have us show weakness to our enemies? Valdris demanded. I would have us show strength to our allies, Zephyr replied. This human has demonstrated what the Empress has long proposed, that true power comes not from the fear you inspire, but from the loyalty you earn. Marcus found himself speaking again, though he hadn't planned to. When I took care of the cats, the dragons, I didn't do it because I was stronger than them or because I wanted to control them. I did it because they needed help, and I could provide it, and in return, they trusted me. They chose to stay even when they could have left. That's not weakness. That's cooperation. Cooperation with lesser beings, Valdris said dismissively. Lesser? Marcus felt a flicker of the irritation he'd felt whenever someone suggested he couldn't keep helping stray cats. They're not lesser. They're different, and that difference is valuable. Shadow, Korith, he could see in darkness better than I could. Duchess knew when storms were coming before any weather report. Smokey could find warm spots in winter that kept everyone comfortable. I had things they needed. They had things I needed. We helped each other. He gestured to the assembled court. Look around this place. It's magnificent, but it's empty. You've built a fortress, not a home. You rule through fear, so no one trusts you with anything that matters. How can you learn from people who are too afraid to speak honestly to you? How can you grow when everyone is too terrified to suggest alternatives? The silence that followed was profound. Marcus realized he had just lectured the most powerful being in 17 sectors of the galaxy about his governing philosophy. In any reasonable universe, this should have resulted in his immediate execution. Instead, Valdris began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle, but built into something that shook the great throne room. The Emperor threw back his head and laughed with what sounded like genuine amusement. Sister, he said when he'd recovered, you have found yourself a remarkable champion. I have found myself a teacher, Celestine corrected. As have we all. Valdris rose from his throne and approached Marcus directly. Up close, the Emperor was even more imposing, but Marcus held his ground. Marcus Chen of Earth, Valdris said, you have given my sister something I could not. What's that? Hope that another way is possible. The Emperor turned to address the full court. The Empress Celestine is hereby restored to full status and granted governance over the Outer Rim sectors, with full authority to implement her proposed reforms. A wave of reaction swept through the assembled beings. Surprise from some, approval from others, concern from a few. Celestine herself looked stunned. Brother, you were right, Celestine. Fear breeds resentment, and resentment breeds rebellion. The Free Systems Alliance grows stronger because they offer what we have forgotten to provide: hope. Perhaps it is time we remembered that strength can come from sources other than terror. He turned back to Marcus. And you, human, have shown us that the greatest power is the power to inspire loyalty through kindness. Your species may be primitive by our standards, but you possess wisdom we have lost. We're not that primitive, Marcus said mildly. We just figured out that helping each other usually works better than fighting each other. Usually, Valdris repeated with amusement. But not always? Well, no. Sometimes you have to fight. But most of the time, most problems can be solved by people just being decent to each other. Valdris nodded slowly. Then let us try being decent and see what solutions that brings us. The formal ceremonies that followed were elaborate beyond anything Marcus could have imagined. Celestine was officially restored to her position as Empress of the Outer Rim with a mandate to establish what the court proclamations called cooperative protectorates, systems that would receive protection and guidance from the dragon courts while maintaining their own governance and cultural identity. Marcus found himself appointed as Special Advisor on Interspecies Cooperation, a title that sounded far more impressive than he felt qualified for. When he protested that he didn't know anything about galactic politics, Valdris had simply smiled. You know about kindness, the Emperor had said. Everything else can be learned. The journey back to Earth took place aboard one of Celestine's own ships, newly assigned to her expanded fleet. As they traveled, Marcus watched the stars wheel past and tried to process everything that had happened. Do you think it will work? He asked Celestine during one of their evening conversations. This new approach? I think it has to, she replied. The alternative is a war that will consume entire sectors. At least now we have a chance to try something different. And if it doesn't work? Celestine was quiet for a moment. Then we will have tried to build something better than what we inherited. That has to count for something. When they reached Earth, Marcus found his small apartment exactly as he'd left it, preserved by Zephyr's technology. But it felt different now, smaller. Perhaps, but also more precious. This was where it had all started, where simple acts of kindness had set in motion changes that would ripple across the galaxy. Celestine and her dragons didn't stay long. They had an empire to transform, systems to visit, new forms of cooperation to establish. But before they left, she made Marcus a promise. We will return, she said, standing once again in his small living room, now in the intermediate form he'd grown accustomed to. This will always be a sanctuary, and you will always have friends among the stars. After they left, Marcus reopened his electronics repair shop and tried to settle back into his quiet routine. But word of his role in galactic events had somehow spread. Scientists, diplomats, and curious individuals from around the world came to visit the man who had helped change the course of an interstellar empire by taking care of stray cats. More importantly, the strays kept coming. Not dragons this time, but ordinary cats who somehow knew that 47 Maple Street was a place where the lost and hurt could find refuge. Marcus welcomed them all, just as he always had. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the grand gestures or the galactic implications, but the simple recognition that when something needs help, you help it. Everything else, as Celestine had said, would follow from that. 6 months later, when the first reports reached Earth of the Free Systems Alliance requesting formal negotiations with the reformed Dragon Courts, Marcus was in his workshop, repairing Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient television, while a new orange tabby named Comet supervised from his perch on the workbench. The galaxy was changing. Species were learning to cooperate instead of conquer, and entire civilizations were discovering that there were alternatives to rule through fear. And it had all started with a man who couldn't resist helping a cat caught in the rain. As Marcus worked, Comet began to purr, a normal Earth cat purr that held no cosmic significance whatsoever. But sometimes, Late at night, when the purring of his cats filled his small apartment, Marcus could swear he heard echoes of something greater, the sound of distant stars singing in harmony, of civilizations learning to trust each other, of hope spreading across the galaxy, one act of kindness at a time. He had given refuge to a group of feral cats, not knowing one was the banished dragon Empress. In return, she had shown him that the smallest acts of compassion could reshape the universe itself. And Marcus Chen, electronics repair shop owner and keeper of strays, wouldn't have it any other way.